when you have faith in what God's doing, you're not living in fear, right? And that's what Jesus kind of gets at him here, because they're freaking out. The disciples are pretty sure they're going to drown. So that guy was the first Christian missionary, if you will. And he did his job well, and they got a group of believers going there in that area.
Oh, cool. So he basically got started on his own ministry.
Yeah. And that should say something to you, no matter what you come out of. You have a ministry, you can go back and bring other people out of that as well. If you've been involved in something that maybe had you captive for a while. Good morning. Welcome back to Shasta Valley Christian Fellowship. We are in Luke 8 this morning. This is the second part of it. We're going to be looking at three different passages in there. Got them labeled out here for you. Verses 22 through 25, Jesus calms a storm. Verses 26 to 39, he's going to restore a demon-possessed man. And then verses 40 through 56, he's going to heal a sick woman and raise a dead girl. And there's some extra verses I'll be talking about as we're teaching. Not necessarily going to look them up, but if you guys want the references, that's where they are. So. And in these three passages, Jesus is really showing his authority over everything. When he's calming the storm, he's showing his authority over creation. When he's restoring the demon-possessed man, he's showing his authority over even the demons. And then when he's healing the sick woman, he's showing his authority over disease. Then when he raises the dead girl, he's showing his authority over death itself. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Luke chapter 8.
We're going to go over to the other side.
Yeah.
The other side of the lake.
Yep. So I'll read each passage through, and then we'll go back and talk about it. So this first one's verses 23 to 25. Jesus calms the storm. Verse 22. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat and set out. As they sailed, he fell asleep. A squall came down on the lake, so that the boat was being swamped, and they were in great danger. The disciples went and woke him, saying, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." He got up and rebuked the wind and raging waters. The storm subsided, and all was calm. "Where is your faith?" he asked his disciples. In fear and amazement, they asked one another, "Who is this? He commands even the winds and the water, and they obey him." So this is one of the trips across the lake. The disciples are probably going to grow to hate this lake. Luke doesn't record the next trip across. That's where Jesus actually walks on the water. We're not going to read about that in Luke. But a similar thing happens. So a couple things about this lake. It's actually below sea level, and the winds will come up off the ocean, these cold winds, and they'll hit this hot air coming up from the lake. And it creates a Venturi effect. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Venturi effects, we use that in like some garden hoses and stuff, to where your flow of water will get reduced down, the diameter like a hose, so it speeds up. As it comes out, it actually sucks stuff in with it and increases the volume of it. Well, that's what's happening with this air coming off the Mediterranean. It's coming in cold, and you got this hot air rising up from Galilee. It's hitting, and it's creating this massive turbulence. And it literally comes down onto the lake and causes the lake to just go into turmoil. And it can happen very suddenly. So as they were sailing, Jesus falls asleep. Keep in mind, we kind of need to understand this, that Jesus is not afraid at all. When the storm's raging on, he's not there in the boat rocking back and forth going, "This isn't real, this isn't real." Right? He's asleep in the boat. This kind of reminds you also of another person who fell asleep in the boat. You guys remember the story of Jonah, right? Jonah and the whale. When the storm came up on them, the crew is freaking out. Jonah's asleep. So when you have faith in what God's doing, you're not living in fear, right? And that's what Jesus kind of gets at him here, because they're freaking out. The disciples are pretty sure they're going to drown. Keep in mind, too, their boats, we're talking something that's probably 24 to 26 feet long. You got 13 guys in this thing, probably.
Mhm.
So, little boat, 13 guys, waves are starting to come over the side.
And it's not a very wide. They weren't very wide boats either. I
No,
don't think.
it was kind of a small. The regular fishing boats were kind of small. Normally, you'd have a couple guys out there fishing together on it. Wouldn't be all these people. So yeah, they by human standards they were in danger of sinking. So Jesus gets up. He rebukes the wind and the raging waters. The storm subsided and all was calm. We don't have any large bodies of water around here, so we don't really see this effect. But when the wind churns up like ocean swells or on these large lakes and stuff, when the wind dies down, the lake doesn't immediately go calm. It can take hours for the water to finally be still because all the motion and the waves going around it. So it wasn't like the wind just stopped. You could say, well, it'd be a coincidence type thing, right? The fact the waves stopped at the exact same time shows that Jesus had power over all this stuff. And then the response to the disciples is a little interesting too. Instead of going, wow, what an amazing thing, they were fearful. They were afraid Jesus had this ability.
And what amazes me is that they'd seen what he'd done before,
Right.
and yet they're still afraid.
Yeah, he's doing superhuman things. And they're not the only ones. We're going to, in the next section here, we're going to read about a whole town that's afraid of him.
I get it though, because it's like you see that throughout history, if people are doing something that you do not understand, it's just scary.
Yeah, yes, like she's saying there, when you look through history, there's a lot of times when people were doing something new, and if a person didn't understand what was going on, they were afraid of it. They would a lot of times even demonize it if they didn't know what was going on.
Think about the story of Frankenstein. It came out of Mary Shelley was writing that out of fear of surgery and stuff like that.
I did not know that. Well, let's go on to Jesus restores a demon-possessed man. So they sailed to the region of the Gerasenes. Your version might say, yeah, there's a few different names for the same place.
Mine says Gerasenes too.
Yeah. Which is across the lake from the Galilee. When Jesus stepped ashore, he was met by a demon-possessed man from the town. For a long time, this man had not worn clothes or lived in a house, but had lived in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, do not torture me." For Jesus had commanded the impure spirit to come out of the man. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot and kept under guard, he had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places. Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because many demons had gone into him. And they begged Jesus repeatedly not to order them to go into the abyss. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the hillside. The demons begged Jesus to let them go into the pigs, and he gave them permission. When the demons came out of the man, they went to the pigs, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and was drowned. When those tending the pigs saw what had happened, they ran off and reported this to the town and the countryside. And the people went out to see what happened. When they came to Jesus, they found the man whom the demons had gone out, sitting at Jesus' feet, dressed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people how the demon-possessed man had been cured. Then all the people of the region of the Gerasenes asked Jesus to leave them, because they were overcome with fear. So he got into the boat and left. The man from whom the demons had gone out begged to go with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, "Return home and tell how much God has done for you." So the man went away and told all over town how much Jesus had done for him.
Go ahead, Laura. Do you think, when it talks about the demons, do you think that was a mental illness
No.
or actual
These were actual demons.
demons? Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you wouldn't send a mental illness into a herd of pigs.
Like those black things that come up out of the floor in that movie with Goofy. Those are real, but not like that.
Yeah.
This lady had a picture, and the guy had been, she told me later, been murdered. But I didn't know. I kept, every time I went down the hall, these little black things flew out. And finally, I said to her, "What's wrong with that picture?" She goes, "Well, that was somebody," and police didn't find out. They thought he killed himself. And I got that picture, and it was hanging on the wall, and these little things would come out. And
Strange.
so then when I saw that movie again or something, I go, they're not that big. It was just little like that when you walk by. So I never would have known anything about that.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with demons.
No, I just walked by, and then later she gave it to me.
So these are demons from Satan.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was trying to tell
So-
her something.
When Satan fell, he took a third of the heavenly host with him.
Right.
And these demons, they're kind of in different places too. So notice one of the things they asked Jesus is not to send them into the abyss. There is literally a place that's called, in Greek it was abyssos, which translates to abyss for us. But this is a place where there are currently demons being held captive.
Oh.
And they did not want to be sent there. They know they're going to end up there eventually, but it's not their time yet. And that's why they're begging Jesus not to send them there. Apparently, this is a place of torment for the demons.
So are these like spiritual?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're evil spirits.
So
They're just evil. Okay.
when he killed the pigs, did they just disperse to other places, or?
I'm not clear on that. One thing I wrote down, Mark 5, I think it's 5:13, tells us that herd was 2,000 pigs.
That's a lot of pigs.
Oh, what
Yeah.
happened?
So what?
What happened with the pigs?
The demons.
So the demons didn't want to get sent into the abyss. And they asked Jesus to send them into these pigs, which is the only record in the Bible we have of animals being possessed.
Oh my God.
And probably because animals can't handle it. As soon as they got possessed, they ran to the water and died. They just couldn't deal with having this possession. When he calls himself Legion, the demon or the demons together collectively, a legion was between 1,000 and 6,000 soldiers. And the fact that Mark tells us the herd was 2,000 tells me that there was probably at least 2,000 demons in this guy.
Wow.
That's a lot of pork.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pork.
Then you also get the jokes about
It is.
deviled ham and,
So we don't know what happened to the demons afterwards. They
we don't know. I'm guessing they must have dispersed to go out there and do their business elsewhere.
Or God could have just annihilated them.
Yeah,
Doesn't
I think if he would have done that, he would have done it
Oh, before?
yeah.
rather than sending them into the pigs.
Oh.
But I never.
Or maybe they thought they were getting away by going into the pigs until the pigs died. I don't know how that
okay.
works.
That makes sense.
So I want you to picture this, though. The Gadara or the Gerasenes was not a Jewish place. This was not some place that the good Jewish people would go to. It was a Gentile area.
Especially since God said the pigs were unclean, so
Right.
the Jews wouldn't have touched them.
So this was like a place of darkness for them. They did not want to go anywhere near this place. Jesus says, let's go over there.
Yeah.
So you're crossing over, you run into the storm, which is kind of like, well, that must be trying to keep us away. You step out of the boat, and here comes this crazy naked man screaming at you. His hair's probably all unkempt. He's got chains off of him. You gotta wonder what's going on. But Jesus is completely calm and defuses the situation, if you will. Notice also that the demons know who Jesus is.
Yep.
Every demon knows who Jesus is. No demon will deny who Jesus is. The reason I'm saying that is because, as James would say, the demons believe that God exists, right? Just believing that God exists is not going to save them.
So are they part of the third that left
Yeah,
heaven?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. That's my personal belief. I don't. There might be somebody that's willing to argue it. I'm not going to.
Oh.
Not
Probably
gonna
goes
get
so.
into it.
Yeah, it's one of those things. This doesn't really matter. So yes, we got this naked guy coming out, ranting and raving, and Jesus just calmly. Notice also the demons believe in prayer. They believe in petitioning God, and the God grants their petition to let them leave.
I wonder where the man got clothes to.
Well, there are people there watching. Maybe someone gave him clothes. Maybe the disciples gave him some clothes. I don't know.
Maybe Jesus just put clothes on him.
Or he was,
Could have been.
or he
Yeah.
was a captive or something.
Yeah.
Well, he lived in a
He
cave.
lived in
He
a
lived in
tomb.
So he
tombs.
didn't have
Yeah.
shoes on.
And maybe they had some clothes there, or maybe they
Yeah.
took. I hate to think they took off a dead guy, but they might have.
Loincloth.
So notice the reaction now of the townspeople. Again, Jesus has shown this great power over this man that no one could control, because they tried to put him in chains and stuff. They tried to control him themselves. They couldn't do it. And so they come out. 2,000 pigs are floating in the water. And there's this guy who no one could control, is sitting there in his right mind. And the people are telling him that this guy, Jesus, is the one that did it. And that is freaking them out, because here again, we have somebody that has this great power that no one understands.
Yeah.
And they're all afraid of him. And they encourage him to leave. They're like, you just need to get away from us. I heard I think it was a sermon, or maybe it was a book. I can't remember now. It was called Take My Demons, But Not My Pigs. Basically, we all want God to take care of the problems in our lives, but we don't want it to cost us anything. We don't want to give up certain things that might be leading to those problems. But
Yeah.
and then the last thing I wanted to kind of see on this too, when they're getting ready to leave, this man who's just been freed from the demons wants to go with Jesus. And that's very understandable.
Oh, yeah.
This guy just saved you from torment.
Not only that, but in the place that you are, you've been known as the demon-possessed man.
Right. You've been looked down on by all society pretty much.
The crazy guy.
Mm-hmm.
So Jesus says, no, I want you to go back and tell your family. Keep note of that, because Jesus doesn't always say that. A lot of times he says, I want you to keep quiet about this. But he tells him to go back and tell his family. We know that he did that. We're not going to see it in Mark, but if you go to the other three Gospels,
Matthew, Luke, and John.
Yeah, when the disciples go back there, that's when they had the whole thing with Jesus walking on the water. When they go back there, they are welcomed. And people are bringing out all these sick people for Jesus to heal. So that guy was the first Christian missionary, if you will. And he did his job well. And they got a group of believers going there in that area.
Oh,
So
cool.
he basically got started on his own ministry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that should say something to you, no matter what you come out of. You have a ministry that you can go back and bring other people out of that as well. If you've been involved in something that maybe had you captive for a while. Let's move on to verse 40, through the end of the chapter here. Now, when Jesus returned, so he's gone back to the Galilee area. Now, when Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. Then a man named Jairus, a synagogue leader, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house, because his only daughter, a girl of about 12, was dying. As Jesus was on his way, the crowds almost crushed him. And a woman was there who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years, but no one could heal her. She came up behind him and touched the edge of his cloak, and immediately her bleeding stopped. Who touched me? Jesus asked. When they all denied it, Peter said, Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. But Jesus said, someone touched me. I know that the power has gone out from me. Then the woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at his feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had touched him and how she had been instantly healed. Then he said to her, Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace. While Jesus was still speaking, someone came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. "Your daughter is dead," he said. "Don't bother the teacher anymore." Hearing this, Jesus said to Jairus, "Don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed." When he arrived at the house of Jairus, he did not let anyone go in with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Meanwhile, all the people were wailing and mourning for her. "Stop wailing," Jesus said. "She's not dead, but asleep." They laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and said, "My child, get up." Her spirit returned, and at once she stood up. Then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astonished, but he ordered them not to tell anyone what had happened.
But yet he told the man to tell people.
Yeah. So we'll get to that too.
Telling people not to do something.
It's like telling a kid.
Yeah. So keep in mind now, if you're this Jairus guy, or Jairus, okay, however you want to pronounce it, he's a synagogue ruler, or he's in charge of the synagogue. Basically, he took care of the scrolls, made sure the place was locked up and taken care of. It doesn't sound like much, but it was actually a place of a position of honor and respect. He was also probably a man of means, because these mourners, the other gospels tell us they're professional mourners. There are people that when a wealthy family lost an individual, they would show up and put on a big show of mourning and crying and making it look like this guy was, or person was dearly loved, and they get paid for it. They're professionals. Wow. Yeah. And that's who's jeering or laughing at Jesus. Now, Mark didn't say this, but the other gospels say that he put them out. Okay. He actually kicked them out of the house when they laughed at him. Kicked him out. Yeah, when they laughed at him. But before that, let's look back at verse. Oh, I didn't finish talking about Jairus. Yeah. So your daughter's dying, and he hears that there is this healer, this guy that's doing miracle healings. He may have sent a servant out to look for him and bring him in or something. The servant says, "Well, I'm sorry, but he's gone across the lake. We can't get to him. But we're expecting him back." So Jairus is probably in this crowd of people waiting for Jesus to come back across the lake.
So are they on the good side or the
they're
bad
yeah,
side?
they're on the Jewish side.
Okay.
They're waiting.
So he came back from the other side.
Yeah, so when Jesus comes back, they're waiting for Jesus to come back. And they all got different reasons for waiting for him to be there. But there's a crowd there waiting for him. And so this guy in this position of honor, respect, affluence, falls at his knees at Jesus' feet and begs Jesus to come and heal his daughter. A lot of times, people think they don't need Jesus until something really bad happens, and then they're begging for Jesus to come pull them out of whatever they're involved in. Now, this woman, it's interesting that her bleeding problem was been going on for 12 years. And in the meantime, this guy's got a 12-year-old daughter that's dying. I don't think there's really a connection there. It's just kind of a quinky-dink, if you will. But with them, I add this Leviticus passage. When a woman was bleeding like that, she was considered ceremonial unclean. So she couldn't even really touch anyone, because then they become ceremonially unclean. Normally, it's just for the time period when she's actually bleeding. This woman's been bleeding for 12 years. She has not had any physical contact with anybody in 12 years, probably. She may have accidentally bumped into people. But now she is pushing her way through a crowd to reach Jesus.
So she's touching people.
She's probably...
Yeah, get out of my way.
And the reason that she's thinking that Luke doesn't tell us this, but both Matthew and Mark tells us that she's thinking in her mind, if I could just touch his cloak, if I could just touch the edge of his cloak, I'll be healed. And that comes from Malachi. So if you go to the last book of the Old Testament, the last chapter of that book, second verse. Actually, let's do that, because I need to explain something out of that.
Malachi 4:2.
Yeah, Malachi 4:2. I guess we could probably just start in 4:1. He's prophesying about a day of judgment and renewal that's coming. It says, surely the day is coming. It will burn like a furnace. All the arrogant and every evildoer will be stubble, and the day that is coming will set them on fire, says the Lord Almighty. Not a root or a branch will be left to them. And here's what we want to key in on, though. But for you who revere my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its rays, and you will go out and frolic like well-fed calves. The NIV uses the word rays. I think there was one other translation that did. Most translations talk about its wings. The word can actually be translated into a covering, a garment. And the Jewish people knew that when the Messiah came, that even touching his garment would heal him. There was, it's not with our culture, but with their culture, a corner of a person's garment kind of held their identity. So when we look at the story of Ruth and Boaz, Ruth asked Boaz to cover her with a corner of his garment. That was to say that she wanted to be identified with Boaz. When David cut Saul's cloak, he cut the corner off of it to show that it was his identity. So there was your identity was tied into this corner of the garment. Also, the Jewish people had tassels.
Yeah, that was blue and white.
Yeah, they had tassels on the four corners of the garments.
Right.
It was something God had told them to do to show that they were like a priestly line. But all the people in Jesus' day knew about this prophecy that the Messiah would be identified as a person who heals. There'd be healing in his wings, in his clothing, no matter what. He'd just be identified as a healer. That makes sense. So that's what she's thinking. She's going, if I can just touch him, then I'll be healed. And that for her was her, we call it a point of contact for her faith. She could use that to release her faith. She know if I just touch him, I'll be healed. Did she have to touch him? No. But he would have healed her if she just asked. But maybe she's thinking she can do this secretly, because there again, she's dealing with a socially unacceptable disease. And I think that's where Jesus says, who touched me? I think he knew good and well who touched him.
Well, I was going to say, he must have known.
I have a feeling he was probably looking in her general direction. I almost get the picture of like you walk into the kitchen and you see your 3-year-old there with like cookie crumbs all over them and chuckle on their face. And you go, who got into the cookies? You know good and well who got into the cookies. You want them to kind of admit that they got into the cookies. I think that's what he was doing with her. He wanted her to pass up. Because it said that she was unable to hide. So I have a feeling he was looking like right in her direction, almost looking through the crowd of people at her as she's trying to. And she finally fesses up. Yeah, I did it. This is why I was bleeding for so long, but I'm healed now.
12 years, golly.
Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering how much it was, and it's like, how much did she have to eat to keep up with that?
Well,
I would have thought it would have killed her. I mean,
Exactly. Or how much flow.
I think it's Mark. Mark tells us that she saw several physicians about this.
Man.
Mark.
Yeah. I can't remember. It may have been 41. One of those two. She sees several physicians, but they don't heal her. In fact, they make her condition worse. Thinking of the medical abilities of that time period, I can see, they made her life a lot worse. So let's move on from her to the daughter. Oh, wait, actually, I want to make one last comment here. Verse 48, Jesus calls this woman daughter. The woman's been bleeding for 12 years. She's not exactly a kid. She's probably
In her
mid-20s, maybe even a little bit older. And yet Jesus calls her daughter, which is a very affectionate thing to do, where she was expecting rejection because she was breaking biblical law by pushing her way through this cloud of people and then touching him, of all things. Because anyone you touched would have been defiled, which means you would have been defiling a rabbi or whatever. She was probably expecting rejection from that. And to have Jesus accept her and say, daughter, your faith has healed you. It's really touching.
It is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. So then when he's talking to her, Jairus' servant shows up. It says someone from his house. It may not have been a servant. It tells him that his daughter's dead.
Okay, so is it Jairus' daughter or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tells him that his daughter's dead. It says, don't bother the teacher anymore. Basically, that's the end of their faith. They know that Jesus can heal sick people, but nobody can raise someone from the dead. And that's where their faith kind of ended right there. There's no reason to bother Jesus anymore. We see this today. A lot of people will think that, it's too late for me. Jesus can't help me. No, God can't help me. God's a miracle worker. He can do things.
Whether or not he will, that's.
Yeah, but still, they should have hope and faith. So going on to verse 50. So hearing that they said, your daughter's dead, don't bother the teacher. Jesus said to Jairus, don't be afraid, just believe, and she will be healed. Jairus, you came to me believing I could heal her. I still can. So they arrive at the house, and like I said, these professional mourners are there. And Jesus goes, she's not dead, she's only asleep.
They laugh at him.
Yeah.
Yep.
Don't think of him as lying about her being asleep. Sleep in that culture is a euphemism for death.
Mm-hmm.
In the Old Testament, when someone died, it was said that they slept with their fathers. When Lazarus dies, Jesus tells the disciples, goes, Lazarus has fallen asleep. I need to go wake him up. They're like, Lord, if he's asleep, he'll get better. He goes, no, okay, Lazarus is dead. We're going to go raise him. He had to cut out point blank for him. But notice we don't really see it in here, but Jesus puts them out of the house, these mourners that were scoffing at him.
It was in Mark.
There's a Mark, yeah.
It's in Mark.
So he puts them out. And that kind of goes along with another thing that Jesus said, where those that have will be given more, and those that do not have, even what they have will be taken from them. If you look at that as faith, when he said that she is asleep, those people that didn't have the faith were put out of the house, so they didn't get to see what happened. The ones that had the faith got to see what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So he takes her by the hand, says, get up. Mark tells us that he said this in Aramaic. It actually gives you the Aramaic words that he said. It's not like he used some magical incantation or whatever. He basically took her by the hand and said, little girl, get up. Like a parent would wake their child. So what we can get out of that is one day we're going to fall asleep long term. And Jesus is going to call to us and say, it's time for you to wake up. So anyway, Jesus just tells her, my child, get up. And her spirit returned. That tells us that she was dead. She wasn't just asleep, she was dead because her spirit had left her. When you die, your spirit leaves you. Notice also, he did not do this for the daughter's benefit. He did this for Jairus' benefit. The daughter was probably in heaven. So let's say I die. And then somebody has the power of resurrection, and I'm up there in heaven enjoying my time with God, and they call me back to here. I'm not going to be happy.
Yeah, no.
It's like,
You're all right.
I'm not, yeah,
I'm done.
thanks a lot, guy.
Yeah.
You could have joined me up there. We wouldn't, no.
Obviously, I've seen a lot of people die, but The thing is that I have to keep telling the family, it's like, do you want them to stick around for you or
Yeah.
for them? Because it's like, they're not really doing anything for themselves. They're stuck in this bed. They haven't been able to get up to the bathroom. You're watching them kind of writhe in pain every day.
Yeah.
Why do you want to keep watching that?
It's selfish.
It's very selfish.
It is very selfish.
So
Yeah, but you're not supposed to put them to sleep, like.
No, you're
No.
not.
you do, but-
So that brings us to another point now. Jesus told the family not to tell anyone what had happened. Why do you think that is? This would be, you think that this would be like great PR. This guy's going around raising people from the dead now. He's got to be the Messiah, right? So why would he tell them not to tell anyone?
And yet tell the people about the crazy guy.
Yeah. Think about this now. You just heard that this guy can raise people from the dead. You just lost a loved one.
Oh, yeah.
I'm picturing in my mind all these people dragging bodies around chasing Jesus. Hey, can you heal my grandma? Can you heal my daughter?
Okay,
Yeah. They would have been chasing him for the wrong reasons.
but I can see that why he would have said, don't say anything.
Yeah.
Right, because they're following him because they want to get their family members healed, not because he's the Son of God. When he's healing these people, is to show that he has the power and authority to do so. He didn't come down here to raise a bunch of people from the dead, not in the literal sense.
You know, when we were before, we might have been in, when we were doing Bible study, when we were talking about, you know, Jesus started his whatchamacallit,
His
ministry at 30, but he
basically, Jesus
hung on the cross when he was
in this
what,
passage
32,
has shown that he has
33,
power.
30.
He has
So he
authority
really
over the
did-
wind.
Well, he
had about 3 years of
ways,
ministry,
basically
natural
Oh,
thing.
it wasn't
He has
very
authority
long
over
then.
disease. He has
Oh.
authority over the demons. He has all authority. You say that God in heaven gave him all authority over everything. So. And with that, we finished up chapter 8. Are there any questions on the passage itself?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, let's wrap it up then. Bye, YouTube.